Most people never notice the moment it happens. You get paid. The number appears in your account, and almost immediately, almost automatically, it begins to leave. Rent or mortgage, utilities, subscriptions you forgot you had, groceries, the car, the insurance on the car, a dinner out because the week was difficult, a purchase that felt reasonable in the moment. And by the time the next payment arrives, the previous one has largely dissolved into the shape of your life, into things used, consumed, or already forgotten. This is not a character flaw, it is a pattern. And patterns, once you can see them clearly, can be changed. But the first step is understanding what is actually happening, not at the level of individual purchases. Those matter, but they are symptoms. What matters is the underlying structure, the architecture of how money moves through your life, and whether that architecture is working for you or simply running on its own momentum, carrying your income from one obligation to the next until there is nothing left to redirect. The system you are living inside has a shape. Most people have never been shown that shape. There are, broadly speaking, two ways that money moves through a person's financial life. Not two income levels, not two types of people, two systems, two different architectures for handling the flow of money from the moment it arrives to the moment it does something durable. The first system is the one most people inhabit without ever choosing it. Money arrives. Obligations are met. Whatever remains becomes available for spending. And because it is available, it tends to get spent. This is not irrational. When money sits in an account, it feels real, it feels present, and the brain treats it as usable, so it gets used. Each month resets the cycle. Each year looks roughly like the previous one. Income may grow, and spending tends to grow with it. The treadmill moves faster. The distance covered does not change. The second system operates differently, not because the people running it earn dramatically more, though some do, but because of the sequence in which money is handled. Before lifestyle spending is even considered, a portion of incoming money is redirected. It is moved before it becomes visible in the day-to-day account, before the brain has cataloged it as available, before the ordinary pull of daily life can reach it. That redirected portion is then deployed into something that can generate a return. And when those returns arrive, they are not spent. They are sent back into the same engine that produced them. This is not a philosophy, it is a mechanical loop. And loops, once running, build their own momentum. To understand why these two systems produce such different outcomes over time, it helps to look at each stage of the second system with some care. Not as abstract theory, but as a concrete sequence with a specific logic at each step. The first stage is interception. When money enters your life, from a job, from a side arrangement, from any source, it arrives as potential. At that moment, before a single decision has been made about where it goes, it is completely uncommitted. Most people allow that uncommitted state to persist. The money lands in an account, and then the ordinary process of living makes decisions about it, sometimes consciously, often not. A bill comes due, a need arises, something appealing appears. The money responds to whatever presents itself first. The interception stage changes this by inserting a gate. A predetermined portion of incoming money is redirected before it ever becomes part of the ambient pool of available funds. Not after the bills are paid, not with whatever is left. First, the interception happens at the source, and the amount is determined in advance, not in the moment. This matters because of something fundamental about how human judgment works under the ordinary pressure of daily life. We are not consistent decision makers. We are contextual ones. The same person who intends to save a portion of their income at the beginning of the month may feel very differently about that commitment when the money is visibly present in the account, when an unexpected cost has appeared, when the week has been exhausting, and something enjoyable is within easy reach. The intention is real. The follow-through is inconsistent because it requires the same decision to be made correctly, repeatedly, against varying resistance. The interception removes that decision from the recurring cycle. It converts a repeated willpower question into a one-time architectural choice. You decide once, you set the gate once, and then the gate operates without requiring your continued agreement. The money does not pass through your hands, therefore your hands cannot redirect it. Architecture replaces willpower. The second stage is deployment. The intercepted money must go somewhere that can produce a return. This is not the place for a detailed enumeration of financial products or asset classes. This is not that kind of conversation. But the principle is worth stating plainly. Money sitting in a non-earning account does one thing, which is wait. Money placed into something designed to generate a return does something different. It participates. The nature of that participation, what it is invested in, how it is structured, What risks are appropriate given someone's situation? Those are individual questions that require individual consideration. What matters here is the category of behavior, not the specific vehicle. The deployment stage is where money transitions from a static reserve into what might be called a multiplication engine. Not because returns are guaranteed or predictable in the short term, they are not, but because over a long enough period, assets that participate in productive economic activity tend to generate returns that compound. The engine does not run on certainty. It runs on consistency and time. The third stage is what makes the system a loop rather than a line. When the deployment stage generates returns, however modest, however variable, those returns do not exit the system. They are not spent. They are fed back into the engine. And now, the engine is larger than it was before. A slightly larger engine generates slightly larger returns. Those slightly larger returns are reinvested. The engine grows again. This is compounding. The concept is simple enough to describe in a sentence: returns generating returns. But the experiential reality of it is counterintuitive, because for a long time, the growth is quiet, and the numbers are unimpressive. In the early years of a compounding system, the returns feel small. They are small. The engine is small because it is new. The temptation to abandon the system, to redirect those early returns towards something more immediately satisfying, is significant. The people who stay in the loop through that early period are not more disciplined in some innate sense. They have usually built the system in a way that reduces the number of decisions required to maintain it. The returns flow back automatically. The reinvestment requires no action. The loop continues whether or not any decision is made, because the default is continuation rather than exit. Compounding rewards consistency, not brilliance. To make this more concrete, consider a person who is not hypothetically extreme in either direction. Not earning very little, not earning a great deal. A person doing reasonably well by conventional measures. A stable job, a decent income. Nothing obviously wrong with the financial picture. And yet, at the end of each year, nothing has accumulated in any meaningful way. The income has been real. The spending has been reasonable. There was no dramatic failure, no large single mistake. But there is also no engine running in the background, no loop. When this person stops working, or when something disrupts the income, there is nothing to fall back on that is itself generating anything. The entire financial structure depends on continued labor input. Remove the input, and the structure collapses. This person does not have a spending problem in the simple sense. They have an architecture problem. The system they are running does not include an interception point, does not include a multiplication stage, does not include a feedback loop. Money arrives and money leaves, and the cycle produces comfort without producing momentum. Now imagine the same person, same income, but with a gate installed. A predetermined portion of each payment is automatically redirected before it reaches the spending account. The person does not see it, does not decide whether to move it on any given month. The gate simply operates. That redirected money goes into something that participates in economic returns over time. The returns that arrive are fed back into the same position. Months pass, years pass. The trajectory is not the same, not because anything dramatic happened, but because the architecture was different from the beginning. The same income, differently routed, produces a different destination. At this point, a realistic objection deserves a direct and honest response. Some people reading this do not have a meaningful amount of money left after necessary expenses. Minimum spending floors are real. The cost of housing, food, transportation, healthcare, these are not abstractions that can be adjusted away with better thinking. For a household living at or near those minimums, the advice to intercept 10% before spending has no available application. There is no 10% to intercept. The margin does not exist. This is not a character failure. It is a constraint imposed by economic conditions, by wages that have not kept pace with costs in certain sectors, by the specific material circumstances of a given life. Any honest account of the cash flow loop has to acknowledge that it operates within a set of preconditions. You need enough incoming money that there is a gap, however small, between what arrives and what genuine necessities consume. For those who are operating in or near that gap, the priority is not loop construction. The priority is stability. An emergency reserve sufficient to absorb a disruption without forcing debt. Then the gradual, realistic identification of a small interception amount that the budget can genuinely sustain. Starting small is not a concession. It is the correct beginning, because the system's power comes from time and consistency, not from the size of the initial contribution. A smaller amount sustained reliably over a long period outperforms a larger amount abandoned after 6 months. The system does not reward the ambitious start. It rewards the durable one. If there is a psychological layer underneath all of this that most financial conversations skip, it is this. The ordinary human mind is not well suited to making consistently good long-term financial decisions under conditions of immediate competing pressure. This is not an insult. It is a structural observation about how cognition works. We tend to discount future value relative to present value. The benefit that arrives in 20 years feels genuinely less important right now than the benefit that arrives this afternoon, even when we know intellectually that the future benefit is larger. This is called present bias, and it is not a weakness unique to some people. It is a near universal feature of human decision-making. The financial system as a whole is well acquainted with this tendency. Many business models in lending, retail, and subscription services are built, at least in part, around the predictability of present bias. The tendency to consume now and manage the consequences later is not exploited maliciously. It is anticipated structurally, which amounts to the same practical effect. Automation addresses present bias not by overcoming it, but by routing around it. When the interception is automatic, present bias never gets a vote. The decision has already been made, executed, and completed before the moment of temptation arrives. The money is not available to spend because it is no longer in the account where spending decisions are made. This is not willpower. This is architecture designed to produce a specific outcome, regardless of how any given day feels. One commitment, correctly placed, outperforms years of good intentions. There is also a phenomenon worth naming that does not get discussed enough: decision fatigue. By the time most people have navigated a full working day, the demands, the small choices, the negotiations between competing obligations, the quality of financial decision-making in the evening is not the same as it would be with a rested mind. The purchases made from exhaustion, the subscriptions continued from inertia, the money spent on convenience because effort feels too expensive in the moment. These are not evidence of bad character. They are evidence of cognitive depletion acting on financial behavior. A system that requires good financial decisions to be made repeatedly at the end of tiring days against the accumulated weight of all the other decisions that came before is not a robust system. It will fail not because the person is weak, but because the design demands too much. The alternative is a system that requires almost nothing from the exhausted version of you, because the important decisions were made once, early, under better conditions, and automated forward. Build the machine when you are clear. Let it run when you are not. So what does this look like in practice? Not as specific financial product recommendations, but as a sequence of behaviors that install the loop. The starting point is visibility. Before any system can be built, the current flow must be understood. Where does money enter? Where does it go immediately? Where does it go next? What is genuinely non-negotiable? The hard floor of necessary expenses. What has accumulated by habit rather than necessity? This is not an exercise in judgment. It is an exercise in cartography. You are mapping the current route that money takes through your life, so that you can identify where a gate can be inserted. Once the map exists, the interception point becomes identifiable, not what feels optimal, not the maximum theoretically possible, what is sustainable, without creating hardship that would force you to abandon the system. A small interception, consistently maintained, is worth more over time than an aggressive interception abandoned under pressure. The right amount is the amount the budget can genuinely absorb, while still covering real obligations without generating anxiety that undermines the entire commitment. The interception then needs to become automatic. Not a monthly reminder, not a mental note. An actual automated transfer that executes before the money settles into spending territory. This is the architectural move that transforms an intention into a system. The transfer moves the money to whatever return-generating vehicle is appropriate for that person's situation. Again, the specifics are individual and beyond the scope of this conversation, but the category is clear, something that participates rather than waits. From that point, the role of the system builder is largely one of protection. Do not interrupt the loop when early returns look unimpressive. Do not redirect the returns toward consumption because they feel small. Do not respond to market volatility by collapsing the engine. The loop's power is not in any individual return. It is in the uninterrupted repetition of the cycle over a long enough period that compounding produces a materially different result than linear saving would have. Protect the consistency. The consistency is the strategy. It is worth saying plainly what separates the two financial lives described here, because it is often misdiagnosed. The difference is not intelligence. People running the treadmill economy are not less capable of understanding financial concepts than people running the cash flow loop. The difference is not income alone. The loop works at a range of income levels, within the constraint of having some genuine margin to intercept. The difference is not even discipline in the traditional sense, because the loop is specifically designed to reduce reliance on discipline. The difference is architecture. One financial life has a gate installed early in the flow of money, and everything downstream of that gate is structured to generate and reinvest returns. The other financial life has no such gate, and money moves from arrival to spending with no diversion into anything that multiplies. Both lives may involve the same amount of daily effort, the same amount of intention, the same amount of genuine desire to be in a stronger position. The presence or absence of the loop is the variable that produces divergence over time. Systems produce outcomes that individual moments of effort rarely can. The reason this is not more widely understood is not a grand conspiracy of the financially sophisticated. It is simpler and less dramatic than that. The loop requires a deferred relationship with money, a willingness to allow a portion of what arrives to disappear into a process whose benefits are not immediately visible. Most of the cultural messaging around money points in the opposite direction. Advertising exists to convert income into immediate consumption. Financial products built around debt make future consumption available in the present, accelerating spending. The structural incentives in much of the consumer economy flow toward present spending, not future engine building. These are not villains. They are rational actors in a system where human present bias is a reliable and predictable variable. Understanding this does not require anger. It requires clarity. The same clarity that lets you see the structure also lets you choose a different position within it. You are not obligated to run the pattern the path of least resistance offers. The treadmill runs by default. The loop has to be built. But once built, once the gate is installed and the automation is in place and the feedback cycle is running, it continues largely on its own. The active effort is front-loaded. The results extend for as long as the system is allowed to operate. This is not a promise of a specific outcome. It is a description of a mechanism. Mechanisms work according to inputs and time. More consistent input over more time produces more output. The specific magnitude depends on circumstances that vary by individual. The direction of the effect does not. Now you can see the sequence. The income arrives, the gate opens, a portion is redirected before lifestyle can reach it. That portion is deployed into something that participates in returns. The returns are fed back into the engine. The engine grows incrementally. Over enough time, the engine begins to matter, not as a fantasy of sudden wealth, but as a real and growing parallel structure running alongside the income that started it. The person who built that engine is not smarter than the person who didn't. They are simply running a different system. And systems, once you understand them, can be built. If understanding the architecture of money, how it moves, how systems are built versus inherited, how structure produces outcomes over time, is something worth continuing to explore, this channel exists for exactly that conversation. No pressure, no urgency. But if something in this landed, the next piece of the framework is already here. The loop is running. The question is whether you will build one of your own.